When you stop having sex, you do not silence desire, you awaken a storm so powerful that even the depths of hell begin to tremble when a man or woman withholds their sexual expression. The world may think they are denying life, but in truth, they are awakening forces so deep, so primal, that even the unconscious trembles. Sexual energy is not only about reproduction or pleasure, it is the very current of psychic life. The river of libido that runs through body and soul. When it is redirected, when it is contained and consciously transformed, something profound occurs. The lower instincts no longer rule. Instead, they become fuel for vision, creativity, and spiritual awakening. And here lies the reason why traditions speak of demons resisting chastity, or why abstinence is said to shake hell itself, for it threatens the dominion of unconscious compulsion. To master sexual energy is to reclaim power from the shadow and awaken to the hidden fire within. To speak of libido is to speak of the very fire that animates the human soul. Most people, when they hear the word, think only of sexuality, of desire between man and woman, of physical longing. But such a narrow view blinds us to the true depth of this force. Libido, in my understanding, is not merely sexual, it is psychic energy itself. The primal current that flows through every thought, dream, and act of creation. Sexual desire is one of its most urgent expressions, yes, but it is not its totality. To reduce libido to the genitals is to mistake the spark for the flame, the branch for the tree. This fire is older than civilization. It courses through us as the inheritance of countless generations, urging us to live, to strive, to create. It is the same force that drives the artist to paint, the poet to write, the seeker to pray, the warrior to fight. Libido is life force, the breath of vitality that refuses stagnation. Without it, man becomes gray, withered, devoid of will. With it, he is alive, pulsing, restless, compelled toward meaning. When we stop having sex, what becomes of this fire? Does it vanish? Does it rot inside us like a suppressed urge? No. It gathers, it swells, it looks for new channels. If unconscious, it may trouble us, spilling into dreams, obsessions, or perversions. But if conscious, if guided, it becomes the very fuel of transformation. This is why the saints, mystics, and sages were so often men and women of abstinence, not because they hated the flesh, but because they knew the flesh concealed a greater treasure. Think of libido as a river. Left to its natural course, it flows toward instinct, toward union, toward reproduction, toward the satisfaction of physical longing. There is nothing wrong in this. It is natural. It is life. But man is not only instinct. He is imagination, spirit, and will. To dam the river carelessly is dangerous. It will flood, corrupt, and destroy. But to channel it consciously is to irrigate the whole field of life. Sexual abstinence is such a channel. It takes the torrent of libido and redirects it into creativity, insight, vision. The fire that once burned in the body rises to illuminate the mind and ignite the soul. You can see this principle in myths across cultures. In alchemy, the sexual union of opposites becomes a symbol of the conjunction, the inner marriage of spirit and matter. In Hindu Tantra, sexual energy, when withheld, rises as kundalini, awakening the higher. In Christian mysticism, chastity becomes a way of transmuting earthly desire into divine love. All these traditions understood one thing: sexual energy is not meant only for the body. It is the ladder by which the soul may climb. This is why hell shakes when you stop having sex. For hell, in psychological terms, is nothing more than the realm of unconscious compulsion, the shadow that thrives on instinct unmastered, on desire unexamined. When you choose abstinence, you deny the shadow its easy food. You confront the unconscious, not by repressing, but by refusing to be enslaved. The energy that once fed chaos becomes power in your hands. This threatens the dominion of the unconscious, the tyranny of the shadow, and so it resists. It shakes, it tempts, it whispers in dreams. But each time you endure, the fire rises higher. The psyche becomes clearer, and the spirit grows stronger. Do not think this fire is tame. It is dangerous. Libido is the dragon and the treasure both. To misuse it is to fall into addiction, obsession, and despair. To deny it altogether is to become sterile, cold, lifeless. But to hold it, to contain it, to direct it, that is mastery. Abstinence is not about killing desire. It is about making desire serve you, rather than you serving it. Imagine a blacksmith at his forge. The fire roars, molten and wild. If he plunges his hand into it, he is burned. If he smothers it, he is left in darkness. But if he works with it, if he channels it through hammer and anvil, he forges steel strong enough to shape empires. Libido is this fire. Abstinence is the discipline of the smith. Out of it comes not destruction, but creation. Every great achievement of culture, our art, our science, our spirituality bears the hidden mark of sublimated libido. Michelangelo's David, Beethoven's symphonies, the writings of mystics, the revelations of prophets all stand as monuments to energy transmuted. If their creators had spent all their energy in indulgence, these works would not exist. Instead, their fire was redirected. What could have been lost in fleeting pleasure became immortal in form. But remember, sublimation is not repression. To repress libido is to deny its reality, to push it into the unconscious, where it festers. It emerges then in neurosis, in obsession, in shadow. Sublimation, by contrast, honors libido. It says, yes, you are real, you are strong, but I will not squander you, I will transform you. This requires courage, patience, and awareness. It is not the path of comfort, but of power. When a man or woman chooses abstinence consciously, they enter into dialogue with their own depths. They feel the pull of desire. They recognize its strength, and yet they refuse to be ruled. This inner battle is not Smollett, is archetypal. It is the eternal struggle between spirit and instinct, between light and shadow. And when spirit holds firm, the result is not loss, but expansion. The individual becomes more than a creature of appetite. They become a vessel of power, a channel of creativity, a seeker of the divine. This is the spiritual truth. When you stop having sex, you do not lose energy, you gain it. You reclaim it from the unconscious, from the shadow, from the forces that would use it blindly. You make it your own. And in that moment, hell shakes not, because you have denied life, but because you have taken command of it. To understand the mystery of sublimation, we must begin with desire itself. Sexual instinct is among the most powerful forces within the human being. It grips the body, stirs the imagination, and drives us toward union. Yet, to think that its only purpose is physical pleasure or reproduction is to misread the depth of this energy. Libido is not meant merely to bind flesh to flesh. It is meant to bind man to life itself. When abstinence is chosen consciously, this energy does not wither, it intensifies, searching for new channels. Sublimation is the process by which instinct rises, refined into higher forms of expression, into art, into thought, into spirituality. Sublimation is not repression. Many confuse the two, but they are opposites. Repression pushes instinct into the unconscious, where it twists into symptoms, fantasies, or compulsions. Sublimation acknowledges instinct, respects its power, and seeks to transform it. It is the alchemical work of the psyche, the turning of raw lead into gold. To repress is to deny fire and risk being consumed. To sublimate is to harness fire and illuminate the darkness. This is why abstinence without sublimation is dangerous. It leaves the fire untamed. But abstinence with sublimation is transformative. It turns the flame into light. We see sublimation all around us in the history of culture. Consider the medieval monks who labored for decades to illuminate manuscripts, to carve cathedrals, to compose hymns. These were men who withheld physical indulgence, but they did not withhold energy. They poured it into devotion, into creation, into works that still stirred the soul centuries later. Or think of artists like Michelangelo, whose sculptures bear the mark of a passion too great for mere physical expression. His David, his Peter, they throb with life and desire. Yet desire sublimated, refined into beauty that transcends time. In both cases, we see that libido, when channeled, becomes the architect of civilization. But sublimation is not only the domain of saints and geniuses. It is also the task of the ordinary man and woman who practices abstinence. The student who redirects his energy into study. The entrepreneur who pours his drive into creation. The seeker who channels longing into prayer. Each of these engages in sublimation. The energy that might have been spent outward is redirected inward and upward, fertilizing the soul's soil until it bears new fruit. Dreams often reveal this process. At first, the abstinent person may dream of raw sexuality, of indulgence, of temptation. But as sublimation takes hold, the dreams change. Symbols of creation emerge. Fire rising upward, water turning to steam, seeds sprouting, buildings under construction. The unconscious signals that libido has found new channels. The psyche participates in this alchemy, guiding instinct toward higher aims. Dreams thus become the mirror of sublimation at work, showing us how abstinence can refine rather than repress. But why does sublimation shake hell itself? Because hell, in psychological terms, is the kingdom of the unconscious shadow, the place where instinct reigns without awareness. When you sublimate, you deny the shadow its easy food. You refuse to let libido remain chained to its lowest expression. The shadow resists, it whispers, tempts, and claws. Abstinence brings these forces to the surface. The struggle is fierce, but each act of sublimation robs the shadow of power and strengthens the conscious self. In this battle, hell trembles, for its grip on the psyche weakens. Sublimation also unveils spiritual power. In yogic traditions, withheld sexual energy is said to rise as kundalini, igniting higher centers of awareness. In Christian mysticism, abstinence redirects desire toward God, deepening union with the divine. In alchemy, the union of opposites becomes a metaphor for inner wholeness, achieved not through indulgence, but through transformation. These are symbolic languages for the same truth. Libido, when transmuted, awakens dimensions of being far beyond the physical. Abstinence is the crucible in which this alchemy occurs. Yet sublimation is not passive. It requires conscious effort. One must give libido a task, a form, a vessel. Otherwise, it stagnates and turns against the psyche. The artist must paint. The writer must write. The thinker must study. The devotee must pray. Sublimation demands discipline, creativity, and intention. Without such channels, abstinence risks becoming repression. With them, abstinence becomes the engine of greatness. And here lies the spiritual truth. When you choose not to indulge, you open the possibility of creation. The same force that could burn away in moments of passion can be sculpted into symphonies, inventions, philosophies, and visions. The fire is the same, only its direction changes. This is why sublimation is not loss, but gain. It is not about emptiness, but fullness. Not about denial, but transformation. To stop having sex consciously is to face a crossroads. One path leads to repression, frustration, and shadow. The other leads to sublimation, creation, and awakening. The difference lies in awareness. If you see libido only as a curse to be denied, you will suffer. If you see it as a fire to be transformed, you will grow. Abstinence then becomes not a cage, but a forge, the place where the raw ore of instinct is smelted into the gold of spirit. So sublimation is the answer to the question, what happens to the fire when it is not spent in sex? It does not vanish. It is reborn. It becomes art, knowledge, discipline, service, prayer. It rises from the body into the mind, from instinct into vision. And in that rising, the individual becomes more than human appetite. He becomes human potential fulfilled. He becomes a vessel of light. And the forces of darkness, those of compulsion, addiction, unconscious enslavement, cannot bear such light. That is why they shake. That is why hell trembles. When a person chooses abstinence, they often expect peace, clarity, and immediate transformation. Yet what often comes first is turmoil. This turmoil is not a sign of failure. It is the inevitable awakening of the shadow. The shadow is the hidden side of the psyche, the part we repress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge. It holds within it not only our forgotten gifts, but also our unintegrated desires, fears, and instincts. Sexual abstinence pulls the veil from this hidden realm. It forces the shadow into the light, and in doing so, it summons confrontation. Why is this so? Because sexual energy is one of the deepest currents of the psyche. For many, it is tied to identity, comfort, habit, even survival. When that expression is withheld, the unconscious resists. All the repressed urges, fantasies, and compulsions that once flowed outward through indulgence now press inward, rising to the surface. The shadow demands recognition. It does not yield its power easily. It manifests as temptation, as restless dreams, as intrusive thoughts. It whispers, "Return to your old ways. Relieve yourself. Do not fight me." Abstinence shakes the very foundation of this domain. It forces the individual to confront the demons within. This is why so many abandon abstinence early. They believe the turmoil means something is wrong. In truth, the turmoil means something is working. To shake hell is not to banish it overnight, but to rouse its guardians. Each craving, each fantasy, each surge of frustration is the shadow defending its throne. And yet, this confrontation is necessary. Without it, the shadow rules silently from the depths, shaping our behavior unconsciously. With it, we begin to wrestle back power. Dreams often reveal this struggle vividly. The abstinent person may dream of being pursued by figures of lust, of drowning in floods, of fire consuming their house. These are not punishments. They are images of the shadow's uprising. They show us the energy we once ignored, demanding integration. Over time, if we persist, the dreams shift. The figures of temptation may transform into allies, the floods into rivers of creativity, the fire into light. This transformation of dream imagery mirrors the transformation of the psyche itself, the taming of the shadow through confrontation. But to confront the shadow is not to destroy it. The shadow is not the enemy. It is a part of us. Its instincts are primal, necessary, and deeply human. The task is not annihilation but integration. Abstinence forces us to see how much of our lives are governed by unconscious instinct. It asks us, do you wish to remain enslaved, or do you wish to master? The confrontation is the threshold. To run from it is to remain in bondage. To face it is to begin liberation. It is here that many feel they are entering hell, and they are correct, in a sense. For the unconscious, when unveiled, is not gentle. It is chaotic, raw, filled with the repressed and the unacknowledged. Religious traditions have described saints wrestling with demons, mystics tormented by temptation, seekers tested by fire. These are symbolic accounts of shadow confrontation. Hell shakes because abstinence does not allow the unconscious to slumber. It drags it to the surface, forcing the ego to meet what it has long denied. Yet there is power in this struggle. Each moment of resistance strengthens the conscious will. Each temptation endured reclaims a fragment of energy from the shadow. Slowly, what once enslaved us becomes integrated into the self. The shadow, once feared, becomes a source of vitality. Abstinence is the fire that makes this alchemy possible, for it prevents the easy discharge of energy and compels transformation. Without abstinence, the shadow may remain hidden, comfortable in its dominion. With abstinence, it must show its face, and in showing it, it gives us the chance to integrate. Integration requires honesty. One must admit to oneself, I desire, I am tempted, I am not free from instinct. To deny these truths is repression, which only strengthens the shadow. But to admit them, to look them in the face without yielding, is transformation. This is the paradox of abstinence. It brings us into deeper contact with our desires than indulgence ever could. Indulgence masks desire with momentary relief. Abstinence reveals it in full. Only then can we learn to guide it, rather than be guided by it. Think of the myth of Hercules wrestling the Nemean lion. The beast was invulnerable to weapons, but Hercules subdued it with his bare hands. So too with the shadow. It cannot be destroyed with denial or repression. It must be grappled with directly, endured, faced. In doing so, we discover our strength. Abstinence gives us the opportunity to meet the lion of instinct, to wrestle it into submission, and to wear its pelt as a mantle of power. This is why hell shakes when you stop having sex. It shakes because the shadow senses its control slipping. It shakes because unconscious compulsion is being dragged into the light. It shakes because you, the conscious self, are stepping into your power. And though the process is difficult, though it may feel like torment, it is in fact liberation. For only by confronting the demons within can one truly awaken the divine spark of mastery. To speak of mastery is to speak of integration, not suppression. Spiritual mastery does not mean to kill desire, nor to flee from it as though it were a sin too dark to face. It means to take desire into the crucible of consciousness and transform it into strength, creativity, and vision. Sexual energy is the raw material of this work. It is the fire that burns at the core of the psyche. Left unchecked, it consumes. Denied or repressed, it festers. But harnessed, it illuminates the path toward awakening. Abstinence is the first discipline, the drawing of the circle in which this work occurs. By withholding expression, you gather energy into yourself. But mastery requires more than withholding. Without direction, energy becomes restless, even destructive. Practical mastery provides that direction. It is the conscious shaping of libido into purpose, Every tradition of spiritual practice has known this truth. The yogi calls it brahmacharya. The monk calls it chastity. The alchemist calls it transmutation. In each case, abstinence is not an end in itself, but a beginning, a preparation for transformation. One path of mastery lies in creation. When the fire of libido is not spent outwardly, it can be poured into works of art, music, writing, invention. The abstinent individual may find themselves suddenly restless with ideas, compelled to build, to write, to express. This is no accident. The energy that once flowed into the body now presses into imagination. To harness it requires discipline, a commitment to channel the fire into craft. A writer sits at the desk not merely to pass time, but to give form to forces stirring within. A painter approaches the canvas, not only with vision, but with desire sublimated into color and form. Through such work, libido becomes culture, and the individual discovers themselves, not as a victim of passion, but as a creator. Another path of mastery lies in devotion. Sexual energy, withheld and honored, may be transmuted into prayer, meditation, or spiritual practice. In the East, Kundalini Yoga teaches that withheld energy can rise through the chakras, igniting spiritual awakening. In the West, mystics spoke of eros transformed into agape, human desire refined into divine love. Abstinence here becomes a ladder, raising the soul from instinct to union with the divine. To pray with the fire of sublimated desire is to pray with power. To meditate with such energy is to pierce the veil of the ordinary and glimpse the eternal. Discipline in the body is also essential. The energy of abstinence can become restlessness if left ungrounded. Physical practices, yoga, martial arts, exercise become vessels for the fire. They transform tension into strength, aggression into precision, instinct into flow. The disciplined body becomes an ally to the disciplined mind. Without such outlets, the psyche risks being overwhelmed. With them, the psyche is fortified. Another tool of mastery is abstinence reveals the shadow, awakens temptation, and stirs unconscious material. To master this, one must learn to observe without yielding, to reflect without judgment. Journaling, dream analysis, or simple contemplation become ways of dialoguing with the unconscious. Here, Jung's method of active imagination proves invaluable. When temptation or fantasy arises, do not suppress it, speak to it, confront it, ask what it seeks. In this way, the shadow is not denied but integrated, becoming an ally rather than an enemy. Community also plays a role. The path of abstinence can be isolating, for the world does not understand it. To walk it alone invites discouragement, but to share it with others, to learn from traditions, to study the lives of saints and sages, provides strength. The energy of abstinence, when mirrored by others on the same path, grows steadier. One discovers that the struggle is not personal, but archetypal, shared across time and culture. Ultimately, mastery requires purpose. Energy cannot remain idle. To simply stop having sex without knowing why is to invite confusion, but to stop with a vision, to create, to awaken, to serve gives the energy form. The fire is dangerous when left wandering. It is transformative when given a goal. Ask yourself, what is this energy for? What do I seek to build with it? In answering, you shape your path. It is in this shaping that hell shakes most of all. For unconscious compulsion thrives on purposeless. It feeds on indulgence without aim, on instinct without direction. When abstinence becomes mastery, when desire is transmuted into purpose, the unconscious loses its grip. The shadow no longer rules. It is integrated. The individual is no longer enslaved. They are free. Freedom here does not mean absence of desire. It means command of desire. The ability to wield it as one wields fire, dangerous, yes, but luminous. Consider the blacksmith once again. He does not fear the fire, nor does he let it consume him. He tames it, directs it, and uses it to shape steel. So too, with sexual energy. Abstinence builds the forge. Discipline shapes the flame. Purpose gives it form. Out of this process comes mastery, not the coldness of repression, nor the chaos of indulgence, but the radiance of transformation. This is the path of spiritual mastery. It is not easy, for it requires patience, discipline, and courage. It demands that you face your shadow, endure temptation, and persist in purpose. But the reward is profound. Abstinence ceases to be a burden and becomes a gift, a source of power, a reservoir of light. And in the presence of such mastery, hell trembles, for its chains are broken, its dominion shaken, its grip on the soul undone. When you withhold the instinct of sex, you do not merely abstain, you awaken the deepest forces of the psyche. You discover that the libido is not a narrow current of pleasure, but a river of psychic energy, capable of destruction or creation, depending on your mastery. Abstinence shakes the foundations of the unconscious, because it denies the shadow its easy escape. It forces the hidden to emerge, the demons to reveal themselves, and the soul to confront its own depths. This is why hell trembles, not because you deny yourself, but because you choose to transform yourself. Where indulgence numbs, abstinence reveals. Where repression suffocates, integration empowers. In this confrontation, you wrestle with the shadow, and in that wrestling you grow stronger, clearer, more whole. The energy you once scattered outward becomes a force you can wield inwardly and upwardly. It fuels your creativity. It deepens your spirituality. It refines your very being. The storm you endure at first is not a curse but a calling. The fire of transformation, burning away what is weak, to reveal what is eternal. To stop having sex, consciously and purposefully, is to take up the path of mastery. And in doing so, you do not merely resist desire, you awaken power. You awaken vision. You awaken the soul itself.